All right. Oh, geez. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming. And I know that there's been quite a bit of conversation already about this development, and you're here to learn a little bit more about it. We've got the owners that are here. I'm here with Councillor Carpenter. We've got Nicole Good Brand. Thank you. I got the good part. I remember that. Who is the planner on this file. And this is just an opportunity to ask any questions that you may have or put forward any ideas or any thoughts that come to mind. Was there a sign-in sheet? So the sign-in sheet, you'll continue to be kept up to date on everything that's happening, but we've got Bob here as well. And so there's lots of people to ask the questions of. And I think Sarah is probably taking notes. Sarah's from the planning department, and we've got Darlene here as well. So with that, do you want to say something as we start? Yeah.
This is not Cheryl and I's meeting. This is the developers meeting, and it's part of the requirement of planning. And they're here to present what they want to do and listen to what you like about it and what you'd like to see different about it, if there's anything there. Or we've already had some of this discussion. And Bob Phillips is the engineer on the planning. The guy, the fellow in the green, he's going to make sure that all your engineering concerns are heard as well. And everything that you say here gets written down and it goes into a record that goes before council when it goes to committee of the whole for planning. So everything you say here, and anything that you even say here or you forget when you go home, or your neighbors say something to you and you want to tell us, you can email Cheryl or I or Ms. Goodbrand, and then she'll make sure, Nicole will make sure that that gets put into the record as well and it gets noted. And then we will kind of formalize some of the things that you want, so they're part of the recommendation, so they're solidified that they're going to happen. And I know that you want that to see that. Okay. Cool. And then Cheryl and I will take questions.
Yes, so bring this up for myself here. So you can hear me a bit better without me crouching. So thank you, Councillor Carpenter and Antosky. So as I mentioned, my name is Nicole Goodbrand. I'm a senior planner with the planning department, and I'm the planner on file for the subject of today, 800 Colborne Street. Just some few notes about the room, and I'll go over it when we get to that kind of question and answer period again. But just to kind of speak about our new council chambers, because you likely haven't been in here before. So as noted, we have to speak into the microphones because we also have virtual participants. So they won't be able to hear questions or comments if we don't. So part of that process is also using the mics. So when it comes to the question and answer period, we'll have you come up one at a time or with your party, and you'll come up to the mics here in front of me, and we'll just have you rotate one and the other so we can have cleaning staff. Okay. So to get to the fun stuff, actually some other housekeeping. So as you heard probably just a few moments ago, this meeting is being streamed to YouTube. So we'll be available for viewing afterward. So if you miss something or want to hear about something again, you'll be able to view it on the internet. And as Councillor Carpenter mentioned, if questions come up when you're viewing it later, you're more than welcome to reach out to any of us with those questions. It's still available through that method. So the intent of these meetings is to allow members of the public, such as yourselves, to voice your opinions surrounding specific projects. Both to your local councillors as well as to the staff and the applicant. The idea is that the applicant will be able to take these comments into consideration for the final product, which then goes before council. Is it echoey or is that just on my side? There's a, okay. Bear with the sound. So the next meeting typically in this process, we have a public meeting, and then the following meeting would be the statutory public meeting, which you'll again get notice of to your homes if you're within the 120 meter statutory requirement, which has been identified for this subject application. And that is where it goes before the committee of the whole, which is council. Can I get my presentation up now? Thank you. So after all that housekeeping, as I'm sure you're all aware here today, the subject lands are located on the north side of Colborne Street and just east of James Ave and are known as 800 Colborne Street. I'm not able to advance, Chris. I don't know if you can advance my slide, please. Thank you. So the application is to rezone the property from residential type 1B, which is also 15 meters, or R1B, and residential type 1D, or 9 meter, R1D, to residential medium density, or R4A, with site-specific provisions to permit a 9-block townhouse development. To facilitate this proposal, a zoning bylaw amendment application has been applied for as per the Planning Act. So when we look at planning policy, there are multiple layers, and I won't get into all of them today, but the ones specific to the city mainly fall under the official plan and the zoning bylaw. And so our official plan was updated in 2021, so relatively new. And any official plan, the intent of it is to provide a framework of goals and objectives for the city that provides land use designations and policies, which will guide future development. So in the case of this development, the current designation is an intensification corridor in the official plan. And you can see that on the slides and that bright orangey yellow color. So intensification corridors function as the connective spine of the city, as well as destinations for the surrounding neighborhoods. It is the intent of this plan that the lands within the intensification corridor provide significant opportunities for creating vibrant pedestrian and transit-oriented places through investment in infrastructure, residential intensification, infill, and redevelopment, with particular attention to urban design. The intensification corridors are intended to strengthen transit routes between major nodes of commerce and employment within Brantford and are to be connected to the active transportation network, so available for bicycles, etc. When it comes to the zoning is effectively what puts the official plan into effect. It states how land may be used, where buildings and other structures can be located, the types of buildings that are permitted, and how they may be used. It also regulates the lot sizes and dimensions, parking requirements, building heights, and setbacks from the street. So in this case, the parcel is currently zoned, as I said, R1B as well as R1D. So these zonings permit single detached dwellings, bed and breakfast establishments, day nurseries, home occupations, mini group homes, and accessory uses to those, fairly similar to what would be in the surrounding area, going more kind of in the Echo Place neighborhood. The applicant is proposing to rezone to residential medium density, or R4A, and that permits fourplex dwellings, block townhouses, street townhouses, retirement homes, as well as other additional uses. You can see in the bottom of the slide, I've just kind of indicated any site-specific requests. So in this case, we have 3 as it relates to the zoning bylaw. The first being around the rear yard setback. So in the R4A zone, typically, the setback is 15 meters or 7.5 meters per block. So when a townhouse is facing maybe not the rear of the yard, its rear should be 7.5 meters from the lot line. The proposed is 6. For the side yard, the typical under R4A is 3 meters. The requested is 1.2 meters, my apologies. And as far as amenity space, the requirement is 9 meters squared per unit. And in this case, they're proposing 0. I'll now pass it over to Bob, Phillips and the owner applicant and their team to go over more of the nitty-gritty details of the application. Okay. You switch it to the other? And then that one is to go forward, essentially.
Down.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Bob Phillips from Cahoon Engineering in town. If you recall, there was a severance probably about a year ago that was included the pharmacy next door, and it actually severed this piece of land with the intent of doing a development on it. The parcel that was severed was sold to Plenitude, and that's where this proposal came from. I think initially there was some talk about just some single families on this, but through the requirements of the planning department and sort of the OP, the official plan of the city of Brantford, there was talk of a little bit of intensification, and that's where we went from about 5 units to 9 units. This is a proposal that we're happy with. We don't want to change. We want to just go forward with the 9 units on the property. Okay. Oops, sorry. I think Nicole's done a good job in sort of summarizing what the current zoning is on the property. It's a single family type zoning. It's split, so that really needs to be addressed in some form or other, because it's got a very small lots, like 9-meter lots, and it has a 15-meter zone. But we're moving into sort of a medium density type zoning for the whole property. I'll figure this out. There's just an aerial of, the context of where the property is in the area. It's located right beside the pharmacy on Colborne Street. There's sort of our proposed site plan for 9 block townhouses on the property. What we've done is we've highlighted each of the units, and we can give you just a view of what they're going to be like if we get all the approvals. And that didn't show up so well, but there's 2-story units on the property. That's what we're proposing. Unfortunately, those were very light, so we've got building elevations of each of the units that we're proposing at this time. Sorry for the quality, but it's actually our first time doing this. And, in the virtual, and like lots of times we just come with lots of colored drawings. We're trying to rezone it. Whoa. We're trying to rezone it to an R4A, which is a medium density zone in the city. And there's really 3 provisions that we're asking variance to. One is the rear yard and behind the units. This is intended to be a condominium format. So, it's not like it's really intended for kids. But, we think a 20-foot, 6-meter rear yard is sufficient in this case. And so that's one of the things we've asked to be varied. Oh, I missed one, sorry. In addition, we're looking to reduce the side yard on a couple of the units from 3 meters or 10 feet down to 4 feet, which is, consistent with a residential type zoning. The other variance that we're looking for is technically it says we don't have any common amenity space, but each one of these units has a backyard and has the ability to build a deck. So they'll function just like any other home would in the city. Really, that's it. you know, we're here to answer questions, to hear from you what you think of what we proposed. We'll take it back to the drawing board, and if we've got to make some modifications, we'll do that. And I guess at this point, I'll open it back up to the councillors, maybe to run some questions, or I can stay here and
No, I have one question and you heard the answer. The rear yards are 20 feet, 7%.
Yeah.
that's correct.
Okay, so the question right now that we're asking clarification on is the rear yard, which is now at 20 feet.
I understood that it's going to be the 20 feet from my line. But that's
Where are you located, just for
on the back, on the other side, the back of the lot.
back of the lot? Yes,
oh, so it's 20 feet.
20 feet, yes.
And will it be a privacy fence?
And will
Yes.
there be a privacy fence is the question.
How high and what kind of material?
How high and what kind of material?
It will be wooden. It'll be a wooden solid fence and 6 feet tall. 6?
6 feet.
Yeah.
But you make it 8.
The question is,
city
can you make it
allows us.
8 feet?
In actual fact, I think the city of Brantford fencing bylaw only allows us to go to 7 feet.
7 feet too.
What was the height of that?
7 feet too.
So you're prepared to go to 7 feet.
In those rear yards, yes. Yes, sir.
No, you couldn't go to 8, could you?
No, we're not permitted.
Okay, so the question from the attendees is asking if we can go to the maximum, which is 7 feet 2 inches, and the answer has been yes. I feel like I should be running a game show here.
Yeah, it was about 7.5. That's what I understand.
7 feet 2 inches is the maximum.
7 feet 2 inches is max.
No, the bylaw doesn't allow us to go.
We're going to start a bidding war.
Yeah, you may have some fences in the city that are 8 feet, but they don't comply with the bylaw. Someone complained they'd have to cut them to 7'2". I've been trying to get the building department to look at making them 8 feet because it's a waste throwing away 10 inches of lumber all the time. It would make more sense if it was an even number, but anyways, it's 7'2".
My question is, will this fence be maintained by the people that live there?
Yeah,
Yes, it will.
Yeah, if it's going to be a condominium, then the condominium would have to maintain it. The condominiums, the nice thing about condominiums is that they're required and they're to have reserve fund and to maintain the condominium like the day it was built forever. Because there's a maintenance fund.
Any other questions?
All
All right.
All right.
Use anyone if you'd like to.
Anyone?
Anyone?
Okay. One of the questions is, how far is that fence going to go?
It'll actually be around the perimeter of the property. Normally, we would stop at the front yard setback. It's certainly a discussion that can be had now, later.
I'm kind of speaking for one of the neighbors, that's why. She is kind of hoping that it will extend to her property more.
I think we'd be prepared to do that.
Okay. Another question is, how high is the foundation and the overall height of the unit? What I mean to say is the foundation going to be 5 feet from the ground and then you're building on top of that?
No, I would suspect they'll be within 6 to 12 inches out of the ground. And then I can't recall exactly the height. They are only 2-story.
2 stories, so you're talking 16 plus a 5 foot, 6 foot roof.
That's correct.
Okay. I had another question, but I didn't. Yeah, right now I can't think of what I was gonna say.
You can have as many turns as you want.
May
We're
I?
not going to cut you off.
May I ask a question in response to the fencing question? If you wanted to bring up the slide, Bob, so we could just talk about the area that he was requesting the fence length go to?
As-
If we could just look at the diagram. That works. Okay, that's good too. So where on the map are you referring to, sir?
Okay, oh, okay. Push the wrong button. Actually, what I am referring to is the neighbor here.
We would be going.
To here, yes, and she is requesting.
We don't own that land.
No, I know that.
The fence will go down that side yard, however.
Right, along the side of the property.
That's right.
Yeah, that's what I kind of figured too. Another question that was just brought up, the level of the land. There's a little bit of a retaining wall behind and Norm's house. Is that going to be leveled with that? I don't know what there's a fence there, but you may have to be in consultation with them, maybe.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, they'll be on the back.
I'd
but
be
also-
happy to probably, kind of jumping a bit ahead of myself here. What we're doing tonight has to do with land use.
Oh, okay, fine.
And then the next process is site plan approval. And those nitty gritty details is what happens during site plan approval. And I'm sure that you've raised this comment that the counselors will not forget.
Right. Okay. Back to the initial. When the property was purchased, what was the initial intent? for the property?
Initially, there was a really rough proposal for 5 single-family homes in the similar format,
Oh, not independent?
not independent.
Okay.
It was still in a condominium. I don't know if that plan was actually circulated during our severance, but that certainly was.
Because our big concern, of course, is that it doesn't get any bigger.
What I would expect if this goes ahead to council, and with you saying exactly that, but I would have expected this to happen anyway, that the zoning will be very site specific. It'll say 9 units maximum with those development setbacks that we're asking for. So if anybody, let's kind of look into the crystal ball, were to buy the property from Judy, they'd have to come back and do this all over again unless they built that development.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? I have one while everybody's thinking. So my first reaction, no amenity spaces, I first suddenly go, but then Bob reminded us is there are backyards and you can build a deck. So my question from a planning perspective is, why is a backyard and or a deck not considered amenity space, but we can consider a balcony amenity space? That makes no sense to me. Apparently it makes no sense to anyone.
Sorry, balconies are not considered part of amenity space either.
Okay, we've seen that come across in plan.
In our standard bylaw, they're not considered that way. In amendments, I do believe that some have built it in.
It's creep. Okay, thank you.
There was another issue too, Bob. There are some scrub trees at the back corners. And they're hanging over and they haven't been maintained in years. And a lot of the residents in the back, they all garden, and gardening is, especially with this inflation, is a good thing to be doing. Cheryl's a pro gardener. She does community gardens, by the way. And she's great. That's her thing. She made that happen in the city. So we'd like to be able to protect those gardens. So if those trees are in your way, no loss to us, right? Just wanted to let you know that. I know you're going to plant trees as part of the development anyways. So if those trees are in your way, that's okay. to do what you need to do.
Thank you.
Yep.
It's over there. Will be a condition that we can build it.
This,
People who build will still have a back deck, maybe, right? Is there a minimum size?
There's a question here about a deck, and if someone wants to build a deck in their backyard, are they limited in terms of how large it can be? Right?
So yes, there is requirements through our existing bylaws and through site plan. If basically decks were proposed as part of the plan, that would be a part of the site plan as well. But if they were built after the site plan is completed, that is still regulated, much like any other deck build over a certain size and height, etc. So it would just be like any other backyard deck.
No restrictions.
Yeah, Bob, could we put into the plan that the decks will be no bigger than this size?
Yeah.
under the current zoning bylaw in the city of Brantford, you're only allowed to encroach into the rear yard setback by 2.5 meters, just a little over 8 feet. Yes.
So
And-
that we could build a deck, they almost put in 2.5 feet. My property.
It's like an 8-foot, fundamentally an 8-foot deck off the back, and that's the standard bylaw in the city of Brantford.
It's a very small space, so you're doing condominium, where will is there parking?
Okay, the question is in regard to visitor parking because of the small space, the small build.
I'll try, it's on the screen, but I'll. Basically, these units all have integral garages, which means they have the space in the garage. They have a space in front of the garage, and then there's some visitor parking along the east property line.
Provide some additional clarification as well. So that's it was. So I can provide some additional planning clarification with that as well. So we do commonly see requests for parking deficiencies. This application actually isn't deficient in parking. So it does meet the parking requirements for the zone as the proposed R4A zone, which includes the, I believe, 1.5 townhouses. So that includes the visitor parking as well in those kind of front spaces. So in relation to other applications, yeah, it does meet the zoning as prescribed.
No balconies on the back of the houses?
Will there be balconies on the back of the houses?
No,
And I can just add to that as well. So through the zoning bylaw process, in general, typically that kind of design, unless purposely excluded and requested by council, the design aspects get addressed through site plan. So we do have the conceptual designs, and they're not showing those, but all of the elevation, so how they actually get built out is addressed through site plan, which your counselors are a part of that process. So it's not a public process, the kind of finalization, but your counselors represent the public through that part of the longer process.
Yeah, we see the final site plans to make sure it's as we had discussed here. And we get to see that that's happening. The construction timetable, when would you like to start construction? And when do you plan on finishing construction? And what will the dust and noise, how will that be taken care of? I know that's a concern.
We would have loved to start yesterday. As soon as we have site plan approval, it's our objective to start the build right away. Our first goal is to do the fencing get all of the fencing done and then start the construction. Our goal is to be starting with foundations by September if we keep moving at the pace we're moving at, and then be done within 5 or 6 months after that.
Okay, so you're gonna cut the grass, you're gonna put fencing up. Now,
Yeah.
is the fencing contingent upon getting the zoning approval?
I don't believe so.
Well, you could do the, okay, that's great. So you could do the cutting the grass, starting the fencing. And you were talking about, because we have a lot of issues in the neighborhood with migrant individuals, a lot of things get stolen. So you're going to make sure you got security there so that you don't have any issues on your site.
Yeah, so it'll be it'll be completely fenced in, and the front entrance of it will be gated during the construction period. So it'll only be accessed with, like lock and key.
Yeah, I know you said that earlier, and I know that'll make the residents feel a lot safer knowing what's happening as well. Because right now it's accessible by a lot of individuals.
Yeah, our goal is to finish the fencing before we start the construction and put a gate on the end.
Well, that's very forward thinking of you. We really appreciate that. Yeah. Yep. The current grass there?
The question is, when will the grass get cut?
Before the end of next week.
He's got the big mower. Is there anything else, folks?
Just quickly, what's your price point? Who are you selling to? This is like low-cost housing, or like that we're not getting some type of like highest
Lower.
possible to quality.
Do you want to?
The question is, who's your target market, and what do you think the price point will be for the condos?
Target market's definitely young professionals. Target price, they vary quite heavily in square footage. So the smallest is like 1,300, maybe 1,400, and the biggest is up to 19 or 1,850. So you're looking at the market's rapidly changing right now, so don't quote me on this, but like 600 to 750, 800 in there. Yeah.
They're all single family.
Correct.
Attached.
Maybe the planner could tell us what in our official plan could go on that site. Because we've had that discussion in the back.
Well, that is a very interesting question. So the official plan designation on this site, probably from the residents that are here, your perspective, it's close to your neighborhood, but it is along Colborne Street. So the designation actually encompasses that as the intensification corridor. So typically we're looking at a minimum height of 3 stories. The intended use of the intensification, and I touched a bit on this in my presentation, but the intention of that designation is to provide that intensification that we require through the growth plan for the city of Brantford. And I'm not just talking, this site or this specific area of Colborne, the intensification corridor throughout the city. The intent of it is to provide that higher density. So we do acknowledge, obviously, the dimensions of the site are a little bit challenging, but the designation actually does identify in the official plan a minimum 3-story height. And it looks at things like more apartment buildings. Townhouses are listed, typically more like block townhouses, which is when they're kind of stacked above each other. Anything that kind of has that higher density and higher height. And the idea is obviously that we provide not only more housing, but more employment and commercial spaces in those specific areas. So mixed use buildings, commercial, all of those are actually intended uses in that designation.
Could an 8-story apartment be placed there if someone else was developing?
With a zoning bylaw amendment, that could be a proposal.
What's the limit there?
So the intensification corridor doesn't really have a specific limit. It would have to be rezoned. Obviously, the current zoning does not allow any high density, but a high density use would conform with the OP. Not to say that that would be, of course, recommended, but in theory, a higher density has an intended association with that designation.
Right, so I think this is a good balance for the neighborhood then.
The two units at the very back, how many square feet are those, Bob? Those two that back onto the back?
Is it the double, right?
1,800 square feet. 1,800
Is that
Yeah.
each? Is that
square feet,
each?
yeah.
Unit is 1850, I think.
Yeah, the two at the back are both 1,850.
Those are
Yeah.
big ones.
Okay, they're the two big ones.
Yeah.
They're the biggest ones.
And unit 3 is the biggest one at just around 1,900 square feet.
Okay.
So 1 and 2 are just over 1,800, and then unit 3 is also a large unit. 1,700.
So these houses, as I understand, they're gonna stay with the average height of the houses.
Yes, 2 stories within the roof, yeah. 'Cause most of the houses the back on are 2 stories or a story and a half. Yeah, so 2 stories maximum. We weren't trying to frighten you about what could go there, but as cities, we're slowly losing our ability to make decisions on building and planning matters. The province is slowly taking that away from us, and someone that could come by and say, if this development will go forward, and they could say, I want to put a 10-story apartment in on there, come to council for zoning, you would all resist, and so would we. And we voted it down. Then it could go to the provincial group that's called LPAT, which I tried to eliminate, but the council didn't support me. And LPAT would overrule that because they want to build apartments. So I'm just saying, that's the future. So we're losing somewhat control. But so when we know land behind you is going to be developed, and a really good development like this comes along, it's very helpful for all of us. So, because you can't rebuild after it's built. Yeah. I'll come through.
So the question was just to clarify and confirm that the new build would be the same height as the surrounding buildings.
Yeah, so I'll comment on that. We actually had our designer take a look at the neighborhood and what was there and the current heights. And we designed this so that it would fit in to the current landscape, so that it wasn't, it was suggested a year ago that we do stacked townhouses there, but we felt that was a little invasive to have stacked townhouses in somebody's backyard. So we chose to bring it down a wee bit and put it at the same elevation of the existing houses that are there, just to be a little bit more community friendly. Yes, sir.
The question was, do they all have basements?
And the answer is yes.
Okay, so what you're reassuring me is you're not gonna change the plans into a bigger unit.
So we have a resident here asking for reassurance that what they're seeing and hearing today is not going to change into something much bigger or larger or different than what they're seeing.
That's correct. We're not changing the plan at all.
We'll write it into the bylaw.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll write it in.
Okay, great.
Not, no offense, but we'll write in because we've had. Doing here.
That's a pretty typical undertaking by the city.
Yeah,
Mhm.
we'll write it in. So we'll write it in to make sure it's there.
We present something, that's what we,
That's what we'll do. No.
Nope.
Well, we know development's gonna happen back there, and I think you're pretty happy with and the responses you've got for the developer and from Mr. Phillips, Coon Engineering.
Yeah, this time.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and like I say, once something's there, it's there. So it makes it more difficult for the next property to put something that's overtowering those that are there as well. That helps. What they're doing here will help set the mood for those other developments going forward. That you get build like, because it needs to be consistent with the neighborhood. So if you think of anything, anything at all that you missed, or you're talking to a neighbor and the neighbor has a concern or an issue, no matter what it might be, you can send it to Cheryl and I, or to Bob, or to planning staff and Nicole, and we'll get your response back. And some of them were thinking before if they could have, actually, if there's a ability for them to get mailed the copies, some paper copies, because it's hard to see on the drawings, and they'd like to have it so when they have conversation with their family and friends that are over, they could actually they could discuss it with them.
Not that the quality of these drawings are the best.
No.
If they ended up on the screen, I brought along probably 8 or 10 copies, and
That's perfect. That's what they're looking for. Just something they can look back on and say, this is what we talked about, this is what that's going to be. So, yep.
And
I want to be clear about this. It's the exterior is fenced
Yes,
all the way around.
all the way around. Solid wood fence, 7 feet 2 inches. Had the building department changed the rules to 8 feet, it'd be 8 feet.
I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight. It's kind of a breath of fresh air after 2 years of sitting at a computer screen.
And I can provide, so those of you who are in the room, if you provided your email address, or if you let me know you want paper copies sent to you, or you want to come pick them up here of any of our applications or parts of the application, they are public documents, so they can be made available to you. So you just have to let staff know, and we can provide those to you. Okay.
And I'd like to thank the developer. I know you're asking for some side yard setbacks, minor, but you're putting in a really quality development into a neighborhood that has always been a very quality neighborhood. So we really appreciate you thinking about the neighborhood with your development, and welcome to Brantford.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I live in that neighborhood, by the way.
Yeah, he's one of your neighbors right there.
And my grandbaby's going to be born there soon, so we're excited.
Oh, awesome. Congratulations. All right. Well, thank you for coming. Yeah. Yes.